This is a good article to read. What is 45 hiding in his tax returns? Um, 45 has defiled a congressional subpoena and refused to deliver his tax returns as the law requires. The headlines say that decision is that the decision is Secretary of the Treasury Steve Inbred Redneck Mnuchin, but of course is a fiction. Um, Inbred Redneck Mnuchin's statement insists that he acted on the advice of the Department of Justice, but the law and the precedents are clear. Congressional subpoenas must be complied with, and neither the squatter nor the courts have any authority to judge which subpoenas serve a legitimate legislative purpose and which do not. Congress is its own judge in these matters, as the Supreme Court um, affirmed in 1975 in the classic case on the topic. Most analysts explain 45's actions as a play for time he may ultimately lose, but if that ultimately cannot be postponed past November 2020, a late loss may serve as the next best thing to a win. Well, here's a reason to wonder whether the calendar serves 45 quite as well as most analysts assume. What is 45 hiding in those returns? Your guess is as good as anyone's. The secret could be mild. He's not wealthy as he likes to claim he is, which I know he's not. So the secret could be embarrassing but not legal. He personally hugely benefited from the special favors in the recent tax cut. The secret could raise national security concerns, or the secret could even point to a lifelong career of financial fraud, which he's known to commit for years. The longer the fight over the returns continue, especially if Trump loses and 45 loses in the lower courts, but appeals and appeals again, the more likely it is that Americans will assume the worst. 45 already suffers from a wide and deep public opinion disbelief in his integrity. In September, Gallup asked respondents to rate 45's ethics compared with those of other presidents. 68% regarded him as less ethical than Ronald Reagan, 58% as less ethical than Barack Obama, and 52% as less ethical than Bill Clinton. 45 even suffers in comparison to Richard Nixon. 43% rate 45 as less ethical than Nixon, while only 30% rate him higher. Quinnipiac University produced even more troubling results in March. 65% told pollsters that they regard 45 as dishonest, the worst honesty number yet recorded by any survey. 64% of Americans believe that 45 committed crimes before he started squatting in the White House. It's often assumed that 45 has a solid 40% base, but that's not true on ethics surveys reveal a split between strong supporters and a softer supporter. When the Pew Research Center asked in January whether 45 was separating his business interests from his official duties, only 28% agreed with that. Another 13% described themselves as somewhat confident, while 66% of conservative Republicans expressed strong confidence in 45's integrity. Only 39% of self-described moderate Republicans did so. It's unrealistic to imagine a split with the GOP over these issues, but it's easy to imagine a continued melting away of 45's support on questions of ethics. Nearly two-thirds of Americans now agree that 45 should release his tax returns again, according to Pew. The polls would not bend 45 on an issue as seemingly existential to him as keeping his tax returns concealed, but the issue of the tax returns may bend 45's polls. Over the next weeks, 45 will be fighting multiple financial disclosure fights. He has intervened to stop Deutsche Bank from complying with the congressional subpoena of his bank records. He threatens to fight to prevent Special Counsel Robert Mueller from testifying about 45's Russia connections. He's already lost the first round of the Emolument Clause case filed by the state of Maryland and the District of Columbia. As 45 fights to conceal his financial records, loses appeals, and loses again, it becomes progressively more plausible to Republicans that those records conceal damaging revelations about serious wrongdoing. 45 is ultimately fighting to prove he's not a crook. He can postpone delivering the records that would prove the matter one way or another, but as he fights to postpone the inevitable, he risks convincing voters that they do not need a subpoena to read his guilt.